All right, everyone, welcome to our Agent Spotlight interview. Today, we are going to be talking to Heidi Dubose. Heidi is an agent in the Asheville area. She consistently sells between 20 and 30 million per year on her own. And so today we're going to be talking about growth. In real estate, growth often has a certain trajectory, and sometimes that fits your mold and sometimes it doesn't. Often the narrative we're told is that you get started, often on a team, you go off on your own, and then at some point you start your own team. But what do you do if that's not the plan you have for yourself? What if you want to continue to build your business and scale your income while also having time for the things that you love and don't want to be managing a ton of people? And that is exactly what Heidi has done. And so Heidi has so graciously agreed to share her journey with us. She's going to share some key insights on how she's leveraged it all and evolved it over time so you can take what resonates and implement it in your own business. Heidi, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your knowledge with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, obviously, I gave a very brief intro on who you are, but there's nothing more powerful than hearing it from you personally. I'd love to know kind of who you are as an agent, and kind of what your production is these days, if you don't mind sharing.
Yeah, so I've been doing it for 18 years and in this April actually. And production lately, with exception of last year, I kind of lost the fourth quarter due to Helene and everything last year. But typical production is between 30 and 40 million a year, and usually selling like between 50 and 60 units. So mostly houses, occasionally a lot. And if I sell a lot, it's for a builder because I deal with some spec builders as part of my regular client base. And yeah, so I know a lot of folks go the team route, but for me that just really wasn't it. So I went the route of instead getting an assistant to boost production. And this year my goal is to actually hit 50 for the first time. So we'll see if see how we do with that. But
Well,
yeah, so I started with my dad's company back in 2007, got my license and did 2 years there before I joined Beverly Hanks, which is a bigger local company here in Asheville. Was there for 16 years and then just recently joined a new company here in Asheville called Unique.
wonderful. And obviously, that's been quite an evolution, but I would love to hear a little more in detail about. I always love a good character story because we all started somewhere, right? So I think it's
Yeah.
always so interesting to see what led us to real estate. Would you mind kind of sharing that journey and what got you into it?
Yeah, so my dad is a realtor, still is, and my stepmom both. But back when I was a kid, my grandmother, who not his mother, but my mom's mother, was also a realtor. And I remember her being on one of those long corded phones, running around with a towel around her head, talking in the house with this cord trailing her, always on the phone. And then if you fast forward to um, when my son was a baby, we were buying our first house. And I realized how much I loved the process. And I realized I had a weird ability to remember every house that we saw, like where the floor, how the floor plan was laid out, where the fireplace was, all the individual details. And I just started thinking, I'd really like to do this as a career. And also because I wanted to be there for my son too as he was growing up.
Yeah. And one of the things that we talked about on your pre-interview chat was how that really motivated you because you wanted to create freedom in your life. And you guys know how I am about energy work and why we do what we do. I think it's so often that many of us get into the business because we want freedom. And then we get really frustrated when we're working 40 plus hours a week, often more, and
Yeah.
often at night or on the weekends. And I wanted to take a second because when you were talking about that, your version of freedom was showing up for him in his life and as he got older, going on field trips and stuff like that. And so I think it's really important on a side note just to recognize what freedom is to us. Obviously, working part-time and still making the same number of sales is like the ideal
Yeah,
scenario.
that doesn't work.
However,
Yeah.
let's stay true to our
Yeah.
definition of freedom and see if that's, where we head. And then obviously we can leverage our time to hopefully get there. But I
Yeah.
want to highlight that. So
Yeah, no, I think that that definition definitely is for me. More freedom to me more means making my own schedule and being able to show up when I want to and adjust my work around that. And later when the other three girls were added in, and so we could go on vacations, take big family trips, and I'll be out on the boat with a laptop doing an offer, but I'm there, and I can put it away and then, join in whatever we're doing. So that to me is the freedom, is that I can be wherever I want and work my work schedule around what's really important to me.
Absolutely. And you're in control of your growth and how much you put in and what you get out. So
Mhm.
amazing. So you started at Beverly Hanks. How did you get started as an agent? And then when did you go off and really dive into your business on your own?
So the first 2 years was with my dad's company, which is Mountain Home Properties, and I really worked as their assistant basically for the first 2 years there, and just learning the business from them and going on showings with them, writing up contracts for them, and that was invaluable. And then I ended up joining Beverly Hanks because their business is largely, my dad's business is largely out in Madison County, which is a little bit too far out in the country for me. So. Um, then yeah, so when I joined Beverly Hanks, that's when it really took off for me as an individual agent, and I did that in 2009.
So when you were getting started, how did you generate business? What was your lead source then?
I really didn't have one. I remember going into the office in Beverly Hanks in 2009, and of course we were in the middle of a recession at that point. And what I really did was show up to the office every day. And I spent time there every day while my son was in preschool. And I think I really credit that with my initial success because, or initial building of a database, because there were agents at that point that were leaving the business because of the recession. And they ended up basically giving me their clients. And I know that's not something that can be replicated today, but I do think um, showing up and putting yourself in front of as many people as possible, and not just in your office but also in your community, is really the way to build that initial sphere, because if you're not there, no one knows you.
Absolutely. And that was actually kind of a leading question because that's a topic we've been discussing a lot lately, especially in terms of referral partners and creating lasting impacts. But at
Yeah.
the same time, exactly to your point, you really never know who's going to be getting out of the business when, or if someone is going to keep their license, but they have other passions that they want to lean into for a few years. And
Right.
those relationships are the ones that they're going to turn to and say, hey, we've known each other for quite some time. Like, would you mind? And so yes, open houses, your standard lead generation, those are all powerful, but we're in a relationship-based business, and let's never forget the relationships of the people right beside us as well. So thanks for
Yeah, for
sharing
sure.
that.
Yeah.
So you got started on basically a referral-based business, which is what everyone aspires to. Would you talk about how you nurture those clients both in the transaction and afterwards? Because to your point, it's not something that's quite as repeatable once you've got those clients, or once you've got the clients of those people, they're, not going to be that many more that are passing them to you that quickly. So how do you make sure that they stay in your orbit and continue to build those referrals?
Yeah. So they say that your next deal is built into your current one, and I really think that's true. I think the biggest thing you can do is focus on giving above and beyond service to the clients you're serving at that moment, because that's what's going to build the referrals in the future. And you really lay the foundation during the deal. And so, you're going above and beyond what they expect you to do. I mean, like for my sellers, I'm arranging all the repairs. I'm making sure we let the repair people in. I'm basically just spoon feeding them the whole process. And then I have the house cleaned for them before, when they leave, so they don't really have to do anything. Um, and similar for the buyer, I'm setting up all of the estimates and the contractor visits, and basically lining up everything that they're wanting to do, and then helping them with referrals to other service providers. I give them restaurant lists if they're foodies, anything I can do to help acclimate them to the new area. But you basically, if you make it smooth and painless for them, then they're going to remember that. And then the way I stay in touch with them after that is through a database and through touches per year. You put in things like a quarterly market report. I'm also starting to do a monthly little numbers rundown that I'm sending out, because people really like to know where the market is, and they really like to know what's happening. And they don't really have much of a way to do that with unless we do it, because the news is not reliable in that regard at all. So we make ourselves the source of the expert advice and information. And then we send out little postcards quarterly that are about, something in the community. Like if it's Valentine's Day, or it's about a local florist shop, just trying to promote local businesses. And we do something called Lolo, which goes out once a month. I think Lolo operates in a lot of different areas. It may be something available there, but it's a little coupon that goes out for, say, a free ice cream cone at a local ice cream shop, a free cup of tea somewhere, just basically a different local product every month that your whole database gets. And that has been one of the things that has the most positive feedback for me. People love that. Even if they don't redeem it, they love it. They love getting it.
I love
And
that term spoon fed because I think we're all busy people. And so if someone can just take that burden away from us, whether it's in the transaction or telling us where to order flowers, that's so
Mhm.
helpful. So that's such a great idea. What do you do in terms of social media, or is there anything else in terms of marketing that you really stand on?
I'm on Instagram. I would say that's my biggest platform right now they pay the most attention to is Instagram. I think, if your demographic of your clients skews younger, you probably want to be on TikTok or something like that. But I'm 48, you're almost 48 years old. So for me, it's Instagram. I do Facebook as well. Um, but the biggest thing for me there is to have a balance of professional and personal content, so people get a feel for me and my family and who we are as people. Because I think too many real estate pages just closing, new listing, all this stuff that's business related, but you don't really get a sense of the person. And people like to know and feel comfortable with us. So I always look at my little Instagram feed, and actually Arden is the one who got me into doing this and taught me a lot in the beginning about it. But I look at my page there, and if the balance is going too far in one direction or the other, I even it out. So it's basically I try to do like half and half. Maybe a little bit more business, but
And that's so easy to forget, but we're helping people with one of the biggest purchases of their life. It's a very personal experience for them. They're letting us in behind the scenes, a lot of their finances. It's very revealing. They want to know a little something about us that wants to feel reciprocal. So, and it lets them know how to relate to you. So I completely agree. Someone asked, I'm going to hit on it since we're on this topic. Colin said, I love the coupon idea. Can you please share the vendor you used to facilitate? Oh, she said Lolo. Is it
yeah,
Lolo?
it's Lolo. And I do think they're in other markets, so I would just Google and see it's lolo.com and just see if they're available in your area. And it sounds like, you're going to pay for the item. So the business is actually getting the money. It's not like they're giving away something for free. So you're really helping the local economy as well. But the actual redemption rate does not make it unaffordable. It's really not, because so many people don't use it, but it's still a touch, and they still are like, "Oh, that's great! You thought about me and sent me something."
And I love that it's something local. Nothing better than that.
Yeah.
So it's so funny when we have these interviews, I always put out feelers to see what people want to know. And inevitably, the most common question I get is, how the heck do you do it all? And so, obviously, you got into the business, you have started generating referrals, you're building it, and you get to a point where you're working a ton at night, you're working like 80 hours. How did you start to leverage what was available to you? Who was your first hire, and how did you start to get that time back for yourself?
Yeah, so it was after I had hit 10 million and I was doing everything on my own. I really was getting to the point where I was about to be burned out. And 10 million 10 years ago is different than 10 million today. You know what you what you had to do. Um, but so I went to my BIC at the time and I said, I'm drowning. I've got to hire an assistant. And within our company, people didn't really hire assistants from the outside. There was an agent services department, and they would give you someone from there to have some dedicated hours. And it just so happened that this particular person was wanting to step down from being an MLS coordinator in one of our offices and merge to or transition to agent services. And they put us together, which was just, the best coincidence ever, because she knew the business already. She knew the company already. She understood the legalities already. Um, so that was just a huge gift, because I knew nothing about hiring. I knew nothing about, having an assistant, and we basically learned together. and it was great. She was with me for 10 years.
Wow.
And that's what, made, I was able to make the jump pretty quickly from 10 to 20 million, I think maybe in 2 years after she came along. Um, because it freed up all of that administrative time.
Absolutely. I know I've mentioned it before, but I think it's been a while. I'm a huge advocate of the book 10x is easier than 2x. The whole idea being if you're doing 10 million, let's say, and you're like, oh, I want to get to, gosh, 15 million, even
Mhm.
12 million, that we've hustled up until this point. And so we can hustle a little bit harder and get to that next benchmark. But if we were to scale 20 times or 10x, there's no tangible way that we could physically fit all of those tasks into one day. And so, what would it take in order for us to get to that point? It's going to mean leveraging our systems, it's going to mean hiring people. And so, if we start thinking in that way, sure, we might land at 17 and not 20, but it's still higher than where we would have been. So if you haven't read that book, I would definitely recommend it. It's funny that you say that you had no experience hiring because I feel like now you had a ton of experience kind of getting to that point through the people that you've brought into your orbit. And so that's actually where I'd like to spend a lot of our time today. I think when we have these conversations and as agents are watching, hearing these successes is great. I think the tangible steps are where we get lost in the weeds and don't get a lot of clarity. So if you're open to it, I'd love to spend some time there. But when we were on our pre-interview chat, you mentioned that you think the essentials for a successful hire are a multiple interview process, clear task delegation, and development of efficient operating systems. So I'd love to go through each of those things and break it down even further if you're open to it.
Yeah, yeah, and some of this is I've come to those things from some trial and error in the last year. So this is more of a yeah, this will be more of what I've picked up from maybe doing it wrong. So
Perfect. We would love to learn from you in that.
okay.
So to
Yeah.
start with the hiring process, according to your expertise, what does a multiple interview process look like? How many interviews are you doing and what do each of them look like?
So this is in thinking about this, this would be my suggestion to myself going forward, and I think would be a good way to go about vetting somebody. I think the first interview would be great to have somewhere like a coffee shop where it's relaxed and informal, and you can really get the person can be relaxed and you can get a sense of who they are. And then second interview I would do in my office because I would like to know, how they're going to be in that environment, how they're going to interact with the front desk person, with the other agents, and how they are coming into that space, and then have some, take the conversations from there. But seeing them in that environment, I think, would be important.
That's so true. How they adapt in different situations. I think if people show up at the office, they're a lot more formal. So I like that idea of starting in a more casual situation. Would you think of having them do any sort of personality test, or how do you see work to reference to get a perspective on how they show up and if their voice is matching what you need if you're doing marketing or things like that? How do you do it without actually hiring someone?
Right. I think so the company that I'm with now is powered by Keller Williams, and Keller Williams uses the DISC mock personality test. And the ones that I've reviewed and seen how they put together a report on the interaction between two people's DISC profiles, I think is pretty genius. And I'm imagining that this is something that I don't think that it's a proprietary test, so I think that's something that could be replicated outside of the KW system. But I think something like that is invaluable because you get to see what their strengths and weaknesses are versus your strengths and weaknesses and how those will interact with each other. And you want, everybody has weaknesses and you want some complementary skills, so that you balance each other out.
That's so true. We had a call with Lauren Duke the other day talking about hiring, and she had mentioned that exactly. And I think it's important when we're having this conversation to say, okay, what is it that we're hiring for? What tasks are they going to be doing? And therefore matching the disc profile of that person so that's what they're doing. Because if we need someone detail oriented, doing some admin stuff, we're likely looking for an SC versus a showing assistant who might be more like DI, and knowing where you fall and seeing who could kind of fill in the gaps together. So I like mentioning all of that. When you went to hire, what type of person, what type of role were you looking for? Were you looking for someone in marketing or were you looking for more of a showing assistant?
Well, The ideal assistant for me is does a little bit of all of that. They really need to be driven to um, handle, basically take ownership of the whole back end, because what I can't be doing is stressing about, did that agreement get signed and forwarded on? I mean, where are we at with the paperwork on all of these different files that are in the works right now? That I really need all of that taken off my plate. And then also need them to be available to run out and meet a contractor or run out and show a house. Like if I'm already showing a house, to someone, and then someone else pops up and needs to see something, we need to be able to operate, in parallel with that. So you got to have great organizational skills and also some good people skills. So, that's a little bit of a rare person, I think, that has both of those really well. But I think I would weight the organizational skills a little higher, because for me, that's what I lack. I am not great at the paperwork side. I hate it, and it's not why I'm here.
That's a good point. And I like you mentioning that you want them showing homes and things like that too. And I think it's when you go to do a hire like that, it's nice to do kind of an internal audit of where do you really need support. And yes, a virtual assistant could be great. They could do a lot of those admin things in terms of making sure paperwork gets sent and are crossing all of the boxes. But if you need someone showing up to homes, that's someone local. And so that's a completely different search. And so really sitting with like, what in your body is bringing you stress? What are the moments in your business that are really making you feel pulled thin? And what does that mean in terms of who you need showing up? And also knowing if that's two separate people. That was another thing we talked about on a call the other day. Sometimes someone that's there to do marketing is not going to be the same person who is also, doing your compliance or doing
I
showings.
do think the marketing design for me has typically been a separate person, because and my assistant does need to be in charge of getting the flyers ordered and sending out the e-blasts and all that stuff for a new listing. But ideally, there's a different person designing what we're putting out, because I think it is really too much to ask of one person to be that as well, as a general rule. But I did want to add in too, one of my mentors said this thing one time that really stuck with me is, what in my business, in my day-to-day task list, do I need to have my DNA on, and what do I not? And that's really like, what really needs to have my input. Putting signs out doesn't need to have my input. Managing the database doesn't usually need my input. So looking at your task list, like, what can I let go of? And I think I just maybe jumped into some of your next questions about releasing control and what do I give up. And I think that's kind of the benchmark test for me, is like, where am I adding value? And if I don't add value, then I don't need to be doing it.
Absolutely. And no one can do exactly what you're doing. So to your point, what ways are you showing up uniquely as yourself that no one else can replicate versus
Mm.
exactly to your point, putting out signs? That's something that you could hire your neighbors or your neighborhood high schooler to do. That's a good point. So you're right. That is exactly where I'd like to head next. I'd love to talk about tasks in order to clearly delegate them. What does that look like to you?
I think so. When my first assistant and I just learned this over trial and error, and for me at that point, and for a lot of folks who haven't had an assistant yet, if you're kind of a control person like me, it is a process of like slowly letting go of, what do I not need to be doing? And for me, it was a slow process. Like, I gave her this initial list to do, and then I was like, ooh, I can add this, and ooh, I can add that. And it was a process over a year or more that I really learned to get what I could give up. And I'm actually looking to learn to give up more at this point, 11 years into having an assistant.
That's
Um,
a valid point. I think so
so
often we're like, it must transition immediately, and that means everything, but that's
yeah,
how nature works. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, most growth is incremental and can be slow. So
So what does that look like in terms of prep work on your end to get it ready since they can't read your mind? How are you preparing both before you hire and in the process? What does that communication and tasks look like?
Well, that is in process for me right now, because I didn't have to do it with my previous assistant. But what I am working with now is a pretty in-depth, detailed checklist that is being worked up within our company that we're all having input on. But basically, she is getting these um, digital checklist with hyperlinks in it. So here's your check boxes. Here's your links to the forms you may need. Here's the steps in the process. It's incredibly detailed, and you can't really you're not really being asked to infer anything. It's like it's right there for you. And the other thing I'm implementing now is a beginning of the day check-in and an end of the day check-in. Here, as I go through the day, I'm firing off texts and emails. Here, check on this, do this, whatever. Because I use this reference to myself the other day, is I'm like a ping pong ball. So basically, I'm not going to sit down at the beginning of the day and have a full list for her. But what I want her to do at the end of the day is give me a list of, these are the things that you contacted me about today. Here's where each of them stand, at 5 o'clock or 5:30. And just to keep everything on track and keep us both focused.
And I love creating those boundaries of that rhythm of checking in, because then it becomes so normalized. It's not some huge mountain to climb of, oh, I need to follow up about this pretty consistently, or this has fallen off, and it becomes some big deal or a lot of pressure, when in reality, if you create this rhythm for it, then both of you expect that and
Yeah.
make sure that nothing falls through the cracks. In terms of your checklist, well, one thing I want to hit on real quick, Brian and I were talking the other day. I'm a big advocate for Loom, which is a screen recording software. You can add your face in the corner. I love it for going over CDs and things like that for clients. And it's something that I've used in the past to create SOPs as we've continued to grow. But recently we've started using a product called Scribe, and it does the same thing. It screen records what you're doing, but then it also takes what you're doing and breaks it into screenshots and listed steps, so
Oh,
that
wow,
somebody doesn't
cool.
have to just watch a video. So if you are trying to scale, I'm a huge advocate for, even if you are not to the point of hiring yet, if you see it in your future, go ahead and start making a list of those SOPs for repeatable tasks, so that's not quite as big of a hill to climb when you are ready. So
Yeah.
in terms of that checklist, I love systems. Are there any systems that you really use either in your business? I'm going to go off topic a little bit, either in your business regularly that you swear by, and in terms of organizing checklists and communication with your assistant?
So the communication tends to be, just because I am who I am, a little disorganized where I'm firing off stuff, but creating a framework for her with the check-ins to deal with that. But in my own part of my business, I use the Ninja hot, warm, and cool system of ranking for clients. And I have a spreadsheet, and I've had this spreadsheet working for the last 15 years, where I have all my active contracts at the top, everything that's under contract, and I have the due diligence date and the closing date. And then I have all of my hot buyers. These are the people that are ready today, basically, if we find the right thing. Hot sellers, which are basically we're in prep for getting their house actively on the market. And then warm are the people that are probably in the, 6 months to a year out, but I'm tracking them, and, starting, if they're buyers, I'm starting to feed them stuff that's available in their preferred scope. And then with sellers, I'm keeping them updated on the market. So basically, we're forming that relationship and setting expectations, right? And then cool, I don't interact with my cool list very much, other than to keep them on my database. They're getting, quarterly market reports and, the other mailings and things like that. But I'm not really touching them in person a whole lot, which honestly I probably should. But that's my biggest system, how I keep myself organized with the people that I'm dealing with.
Absolutely. A strong CRM matters, even if it's just using Bullet Trail, which we have, or even a spreadsheet or sticky notes on top of your computer,
Yeah.
whatever it is, make a system. I think so often, to your point, like, but sometimes we're just emailing. Sometimes we think that we need to have some whole chain of command completely ready before we hire. And if we're not careful, we're just going to spend forever getting ready and not actually doing it. So
Yeah, I'm a big advocate for jumping in and learning as you go, because and if you're with the right person, it works. So really the key is making sure it's the right person, and then just jump in and go, because you'll figure it out.
So to that point, do you have any like probationary period or any benchmarks where you're like, as I'm hiring, I'm setting this expectation, hey, in 30 days we're going to check in, 90 days we're going to check in, and mutually we will continue to make sure this is a good fit? Or do you just kind of deal with it if you need to in the moment?
Yeah, I haven't done that. And after after this year's over, I may have a different answer for that. But at this point, I haven't done that.
And
And
then
I don't think it would be a bad idea. Let's just say that.
whatever you got to do. If it works, we'll do it. If not, we'll just hire it and deal with it later if we have
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
I know we kind of briefly touched on this, but in terms of onboarding someone, ideally you're kind of telling them what to do as it goes. Is there anything in terms of an onboarding system that you have, or are you just kind of sending emails or documents with instructions as things come up? Like, are
That is
people
a
shadowing you?
Yeah, so the my previous assistant trained my current one, so I didn't have to do that. So that is something that I can't speak to a lot yet. But I do think that my plan going forward would be to, in the initial like onboarding process, to present all of these checklists, have them go through everything, see if they have any questions. We go over any things that are, confusing or unclear, and then work from there. But I do think that, especially if somebody's hiring an assistant for the first time, it needs to be somebody that's really experienced in real estate. I would not do a first hire of somebody who doesn't have real estate experience. That's too much learning together, you know? And I think because of the legal ramifications and liabilities of what we do, it's dangerous, I would say. And it's a strong word, but I would say that. If you haven't had an assistant before, don't make both of you new at the process.
Wow, that's great advice. And I think where a lot of people get tied up is the long-term vision. They're afraid to hire someone that they feel might leave them in the long run, when in
Right.
reality, there's so many agents that are getting into the business, have had a little bit of experience, know enough to not necessarily be a liability, as you would kind of say, but also are in it to understand, to shadow from someone that has experience and use that as a jumping off point. So I like that idea, not like going to a Facebook group and hoping for the best.
Hiring somebody. And I also share that, not wanting to just train somebody for them to leave and do their own business. And I do think I've had some experiences now of seeing admins with other folks in the company, and there is a certain type of person who is ideally suited to being an admin or an EA, and that's really what they thrive on. And so that's the person I'm looking for, is not the person who's going to use me for 2 or 3 years and go, but the person who really loves being a support person. And I understand other people may have a different, strategy, but that for me is what I want.
Yeah. We're all in this to be in service to other people, so gotta be there to support. My next topic was on efficient operating systems, which I know we've kind of hit on, whether it's just sending emails or not. Is there anything else you want to add on that topic in terms of what you would recommend for creating efficient systems?
I think to me the spreadsheet is kind of my big thing that I go back to again and again. And then the CRM, and we're doing this new thing called Rejig, where you can go schedule your social media posts for a couple weeks in advance, and it's AI driven, so it feeds you content that you can arrange and brand, and it's really simple and easy. I think that's a great thing for automating if you don't have a dedicated social media person. Um, and just looking for things like that where you can automate as much as you can. We use Real Scout, where I send listings to people. There's automated searches within Real Scout that I can put in all of their criteria. We can interact about the listings. They can save them. But if they're looking for something really specific, it's going to feed them each listing that shows up that's a match, and so it takes that off of my plate. Um, just things like that. As much as you can automate, that's really good.
That was what I was going to ask. Is there anything else automated aside from searches that you've done?
And I just switched companies, but in the CRM in the previous company, we had tags on each contact, and each tag could mean something different. So they were automatically getting the quarterly marketing report, the newsletter, the postcards, the Lolo. So and you could tag them based on what you wanted each person to receive, and then that just happens without you. And I'm getting similar stuff set up with the CRM we're in now, but there's a good bit that ends up automated.
And within so many of the CRMs, they have drip campaigns, to your point, where if someone is within a given category or has a given tag, you can just toggle that on. If you feel like you read through those and they don't really resonate with your voice or the way you would want to nurture people, go to ChatGPT, tell it who you are, tell it what you're doing and how you want to nurture and see what it comes up with. And yeah, sure, you would need to technically take that and create a whole email and copy and paste it and schedule it, but that could just take a few days and then you got a system that nurtures your people.
Right, right. And I think I've just recently started using ChatGPT. I was pretty resistant to it for a little while, but um, what my one of my things I use is I'll ask it to write something, and typically it comes out a little more formal or cheesy sounding than I would speak. So my thing to say to it is, okay, make this more down to earth, and it's like, oh, okay, cool, and it usually comes back a lot closer to my actual voice.
Same. I'll typically draft something tentatively and then say, make this more polished, but keep my tone or keep my
Yeah,
voice. Yeah.
yeah.
I want to jump backwards for a little bit, unless there's anything else you want to add in terms of hiring. Any other advice?
So yeah,
All right,
yeah.
so jumping back a little bit, but also slightly on this topic, I know we mentioned it slightly, but what does letting go of control look like to you? We talked about doing it kind of slowly. Is there anything else that you would say to people who are really hesitant to that and yet at the same time really know that they have to in order to get to their next mark?
I think that real have asking yourself the question, like when you go through your task list for every day, every week, what needs my DNA on it? You know, really being honest with yourself about that. And if you picture that task and what are you as a person adding to it? And if just a thing, then let it go. And it is key to trust the person that you're giving it to as well. So that's part of that hiring process, you know. But and sometimes you have to go out on a limb a little bit, you know, and you can start slow. I would say, you know, give yourself permission to start slow. Don't feel like you have to throw them everything at once, because that can be a little scary.
I love that. I was talking to an agent this morning, kind of a different topic, but she was trying to decide whether to let go of her open house for this weekend or whether she should do it, even though it's not something she's done in forever. She's trying to decide if her doing it is kind of coming from a scarcity mindset or if it's something that feels exciting. And so the energy work in me is like, all right, we'll sit down, close your eyes and get in your body and visualize yourself in that situation. Visualize yourself at the open house. Are you excited and eager to have these conversations? Or does the prep work of getting out the signs, getting things printed, following up with people, spending your time on a weekend there feel anxious and scattered? Or does
Mhm.
it feel exciting? And do the same thing for an assistant in each of these tasks, like get into your body does it. And sometimes you'll be surprised at how easy and how big of a yes certain things are if you
Mhm.
just kind of listen. So don't be
Yeah, I
afraid to
think
try
that's
it and
great.
take it
Yeah,
back, you know?
yeah, for
So
sure.
on the topic of advice, I'd love to know, since you've been in it for a while, you've done a ton of scaling and you've done it incrementally. So it's been nice to kind of have that expansion naturally. What advice would you give agents that are in the position you were in about 10 years ago? Like they're at the 10 million mark, they're on the cusp of breaking through, maybe they want to get to 15 or 20. What advice would you give them?
That is, you know, at the risk of being redundant, it's get an assistant. I mean, to me, that's it. That's really what you have to do. You've got to get some of those tasks off your plate because, like you were saying earlier, you just physically can only do so much, and so it just becomes untenable.
I know it's repetitive, but I do love that advice because I think so often we've got a whole class of people sitting here knowing they need to hire, right? And we can know this and see that it's on our future and then say, okay, but that's a little bit later. And so until then, what? Right. And sometimes the answer is just like, you've got to do it. Sometimes there is no workaround aside from that. So I love that
Well,
direction.
and I'll add to that too. I think, you know, sometimes the financial commitment can be scary, but I think it is so after having lived it myself, like I would be willing to put it out even if I didn't 100% feel comfortable with the investment yet, because I feel like it will happen pretty quickly. You know what I'm saying? And if you can first hire somebody part-time or split someone with another agent, so you're not, you know, paying 30 or 40 hours a week from the outset, that can be a good way to scale into it. I started with my assistant at I think 20 hours a week. So it was, and then we quickly worked up to to 40, but I was too nervous to go in all at once at the beginning.
Such a good point. So take a look around. There's a good number of us on this call today. If hiring someone personally feels like too big of a jump, maybe collab with a friend that you see here that runs their business similarly. Maybe you don't want to formally partner up, but you could certainly share an assistant. That's a great idea. What advice would you give an agent that's just starting out? Someone that's probably not going to get past someone's entire database, but is still ready to put in the work. What would you tell them?
The single biggest thing for that place in your career is mindset and goal setting and affirmations and really doing the mental energetic work. It sounds woo-woo, but that's 100% what got me into the start of it. I did the Ninja selling system in 2010, and it was a year-long installation that we met every month and we did homeworks in between, and it changed my life. And prior to that, I had done this, like the year before that, I had done the Science of Success workbooks and CDs and things like that. CDs back at that time. But it really, one of the first steps to work through is any blocks that you have towards the future that you want. Like, if I sit down and say, I'm going to sell, 15 million next year, but I don't believe that that's possible. There's some voice inside my head saying, there's no way you can do that. You got to work with that voice first. And so, I'm going to make $250,000 if you're starting out, that's my goal within the next, 2 years. If you don't believe it's possible, you got to work with the belief first. So, like, identify any negative or limiting beliefs and blocks and deal with those first, whether that's through therapy. I'm just going to go ahead and say it, therapy, working with affirmations, working with gratitudes, and then really setting your goals. And it's okay if they sound crazy as long as you believe it's possible.
Yeah, I'm all about that. Is there anything else on the energy topic that you want to hit on? I would love, obviously, I know a lot of people here went through Ninja because we've got a lot of people that were at KW before, but a good number of us have never. So I'm curious if there are any other big takeaways or any other mindset shares you want to hit on.
And this one was really big for me because we were in the recession when I started, but you got to close out negative voices. So I did not stop with other agents in the office to chat about how terrible the economy was and really dive into the news. I didn't watch the news. I didn't read the news. I didn't engage in those conversations. I literally would not let my brain go there. And all I would tell myself is, yes, but there's opportunity. Yes, but there's still people that are having to buy and sell. How do we make it work in this environment, believing that we can, versus, oh my God, it's terrible. It's like, blah, blah, blah. So it is really closing out voices that don't align with what you're creating.
And that's the same on social media too. I think so often we think, oh, this is just my algorithm. Everyone's a realtor. Everyone's doing more than me. Everyone's posting more than me. And you just completely shut down and you end up in this comparison game. And yeah, like it might be helpful to see what other people are doing, but if it puts you in that mindset where it
Yeah,
completely shuts you
unfollow.
down, then unfollow. Like
Yeah.
no one says you have to follow every realtor that follows you. I'm protective of it. I'm not going to follow everyone back because I also don't need to see what everyone else is doing. And so it is your page. You have that authority. You decide what you speak. And also, to your point, the words you speak matter. And so if you're the person that says, I always struggle with the money side of things. The money side is always where I've had the most challenges. First of all, let's change that mindset. Like the money side is where I have the most opportunity for growth. The money side is where I'm focusing my attention today instead of perpetuating the narrative that that's the part that's hard to you or that you've always come up against. And also, I think that like gradual expansion matters. We don't plant a seed today and expect it to be flowering tomorrow. And so knowing that that's a part of your journey, we're not going to just like expect instant success. And we need to also build our threshold for that success. We need to be able to manage things. So if there's something that you have some grand vision of, well, what is a smaller version of it that we can get there? It's kind
Yeah.
of unrelated, but the analogy I was making is, at some point I'd love to like live in Europe and renovate one of those old homes. Okay, well, I've got a bench in my dining room that I have a vision of that I literally don't even have like a playbook for, like, I have none of the tools. How about I hang some curtains before I like decide to renovate some ancient home, right? So like, what are the tangible ways that we're proving it to ourselves, but also proving to ourselves that we can do this and opening ourselves up for more opportunities and habits. So
Yeah, yeah. And I do think it's really important because I'm not known to be a patient person in you. And it's like I think what I've really learned is like the small, what feels like mundane steps every day is what leads to the big results. You gotta just set the routines, keep at them even if they're, you don't feel like it one day. Or, maybe a whole week or month you don't feel like it, but you just keep doing it and you eventually see the results. It's like going to the gym and or you don't get fit in 2 days, but it's the little results or the little habits every day that you just keep doing, and eventually you've got a big change.
right, you always feel weak when you go to the gym, but you're actively building strength.
Yep.
Well, I actually have minimized the number of questions that I ask on these because normally we're running up against time. And so today we were nice and concise. I'd love to open it up for some questions that you guys have. Go ahead and pop them in the chat or raise your hand.
Oh,
Um,
it looks okay. Yeah, you got rejig in there. Okay.
yeah, I got rejig in there. I'll kind of leave it open. You guys jump in whenever you see fit. I love talking about nurturing people. I would love to hear some of the not necessarily scripts, but I know you mentioned like the frequency with which you reach out to people. What are some of your go-to nurturing scripts? I know we hate to use that word, but they're just repeated conversations we have. If you've got someone in like your B category, what are you saying to them?
You talk about like maybe my warm category. So my,
Yep.
my communications with them are just more just educating them about the market, sending usually they're going to be on if they're a buyer, they're going to be on Real Scout and they're going to be getting fed listings that match what they've told me they wanted. So they get to really get a flow of the market. So those it's a little more hands off until they get to the questioning part, and then we just start, question and answer. It's really informal. I don't really use scripts. I feel like I do a lot of listening and a lot of kind of picking up on where people are and responding to that, as opposed to having a particular script. But as far as like people that I just want to keep in touch with, past clients, people in my sphere, I do that a lot through social media because I look at their posts, I comment, I ask, I interact with them so that we maintain some sort of relationship, even if we're not actively doing business together. And you can go and like all the posts all day long, but how many people really look at everyone who liked it? So try to make a comment is what I um, have learned to do.
Social media is there for connection. So often we get on it because we want some connection, but let's not miss the opportunity and just consume. Let's also show up for other people and it'll come back to us.
Yeah.
I might have something that I just thought about that I don't know if it's off topic, but I know a lot of people at Choice try to do this. But Heidi, I know that you have Reams Creek Golf, which is a community that Heidi does a lot of listings in, and I know even Ashley and I think of a few agents that just want to kind of hone in on a neighborhood. Do you have any tips or how you achieved that in Reams Creek?
Oh yeah, so I didn't mention that earlier, but this is a big piece of my big piece of my marketing. I send out just listed and just sold postcards in a neighborhood, and if you do it just once, it really doesn't have an impact. But if you do it every sale that you have, it is kind of a momentum thing. It just builds on each other. And there's so many times when I go to a listing appointment in Ravens Creek Golf and I see my card laying on the table and they've saved it from the last, house that I sold. One person even had saved a whole basket. I mean, it was like wild, but, and if I don't have a recent closing, and even when I do, I'll send out a quarterly or annual list of all the sales in that neighborhood. So people are getting educated about their market that they're living in. I mean, most of them don't really know. They talk to their neighbor or something, um, but yeah, that's the direct mailing that's really worked for me is just listed and just sold and doing it repeatedly. You got to do it over years, months and years, not just one time.
That's so true. I used to stand on mailers. I built a referral based business. I'd done internet leads leading up to that. And then once I stopped, I just really poured in to doing direct mail. And it wasn't even every month, it was probably every other month. And I saw a ton of returns. And then for years, I stopped doing that. And just this January, I started doing it again just to people in my database, sending them a home valuation letter and making sure I did a handwritten note on each of them. And that has built so much more of a connection. There are at least 10 people that I've talked to that I haven't talked to in like 5 years, and they feel really tight. They're people that are inviting me over for dinner and things like that. And so don't discount that. It's definitely something that takes a little time. It's a great thing to have an assistant help you work on, mind you. But direct mail is definitely not dead. I also like you talking about market updates. I'm going to do a quick plug because Choice Agents at the bottom of the calendar email, when you get it each month, we have embedded a video of Brian doing market updates. And so that is information that our clients want to know. It's stuff that's really easy to consume. And so often I'll just listen to that a few times and kind of internally digest it and find my own words for it. But that's what people want to know is not, are you ready to sell tomorrow? It's, hey, like what's happening in the market around me and how is that affecting my property and the equity that I have. Allison asks, does the market update go to the entire neighborhood or is it just the neighborhood you live in?
No, it goes to the entire neighborhood, and I don't live in that neighborhood, but it's I do send it to the whole neighborhood, and it is more of an investment. A lot of agents will use just sold, just carts, or just listed, just sold, and send it to 25 homes because that's what the company I was with offered for free. But you put in a little extra investment and do the entire neighborhood. That's where you really get the effect. I feel.
Absolutely. And I know sometimes we're hesitant of doing like just sold, just listed, but unfortunately, busy equals successful in so many people's minds. And so they want to be seen that you're closing things. I don't think it's necessarily what we always need to be posting on social media. Eric Rainey talked about this in our training the other day. If all you're doing is posting just closed, it's kind of like, well, great, you're doing your job, right? And so, but I think the opposite is true in direct mail. People do want to see that you're closing things. That means that you're active in the market and that you can get people to the finish line. Obviously sprinkle it in there in social
And
media.
it's also name recognition because it's just like with all the political signs and stuff, they see your name over and over and over again and your face over and over and over again. Then, if they don't have anybody else that's an obvious fit for them, they're going to probably come to you.
Jessica was asking who does your marketing for you in terms
Um,
of
so the previous company, I had a dedicated marketing rep, and then at the current company, we have an in-house marketing rep that I just send her, I need this postcard designed, and she does it.
amazing. Do you do any in-person events?
I don't. I'm an introvert. I don't want to do that.
I feel you. And that's good to know. If that is not something that lights you up, I am not an event planner. I
Sounds terrible.
flight for a trip that I have in like a week and a half just the other day. So like know
Yeah.
your strengths and that is okay. You don't have to be the one putting on those big events.
Yeah.
Brian said if you haven't heard the story about the experiment that Hobbs did about name recognition, I'll mention that here or in a future video. Yeah, Brian, I think I know which one you're talking about, but why don't you chime in?
Sorry, I'm multitasking, so I stayed off. But just to reiterate the importance of what she said about name recognition, Hobbs which is a marketing company, did this experiment, and this was years ago, this is before I even got in the business. But they surveyed into a neighborhood, so they called into the neighborhood and said, okay, if you were going to sell your house today, who would you hire? What agent would you hire? And they notated all the names, and there was no clear agent. Maybe an agent may have gotten their name mentioned more than once, but mostly just separate agents. And so then over the next 8 weeks, they sent in a mailer to the neighborhood. They made up a fake real estate brokerage and a fake real estate agent and used their names to mail into the neighborhood 8 times over 8 weeks. Then they surveyed the neighborhood again, and overwhelmingly, agents said they would hire this agent that didn't actually exist. And so that, but if people wonder from that have a background at KW where 8x8 came from, KW didn't invent this stuff, right? They took what other marketing and coaching companies and had created over time, and they made it a KW kind of branded thing. But that's where that originated from, and so it's about that just consistency over time. The content doesn't matter so much. Of course, it should look good, and today it's so easy to make it look good on Canva. But that consistency over time is what does it. And so a fake real estate agent could have had all of those listings. And if they can do it, so can you. And by the way, there was a lot more competition in people's mailbox back in the 90s than there is today, because everything in their mailbox today are coupons and bills. And so if you're sending something that isn't that, no other real estate agent is doing direct mail. So you've got a like blank canvas to paint for the people in the neighborhood.
Yes, thank you. Anyone have any final questions before we hop off? You're all here for a reason. Now's your chance.
I wanted to see, just to follow up on that, Heidi, do you send any like personal letters to Reems Creek, or is it just postcards?
No, just the postcards is all I have done. And then, you know, following up with people that have reached out to me personally, of course, but yeah, I don't initiate like handwritten letters.
Okay.
I have one more question in the chat. Aaron asked, this has been excellent. Do you pay your assistant as 1099? That might be a CPA question, but always curious people's thoughts.
So when I was with Beverly Hanks, they had the agent services department. So they paid them, and basically it just showed up on my account as one of my company expenses. And I like things to stay the same. So I asked my new company to do that, and they did. So that's like that's how it's been done. She's an employee of the company. But I think a lot of people would do it as a 1099 potentially, or they might have to, you know, or they might add them to payroll and pay payroll tax and do all that jazz. But I have not had to do that.
Absolutely. Thanks. Any other questions? All right, y'all. Well, you know where to find us. If anything else comes up, send it our way. Heidi, thank you so much for doing this today. Arden, thank you so much for the introduction.
Yeah.
You both are wonderful. That's how we continue to increase our knowledge. So thank you for helping create the ripple.
Thank you, Heidi.
Thanks, guys. Good to meet everybody.
Have a wonderful rest of your day.
All right, y'all too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.